Hey guys, I've got Piper here, and no, she hasn't been changed because I love this outfit on her. Actually, I just love this outfit in general. So, I kind of wanted to touch on some things. I've had a few people ask me how I'm doing. And, you know, just kind of checking in, which I appreciate. And so I thought I would kind of get into that for you guys. So, I know it's going to be this way for a while, with losing my dad. Sorry guys, I'm putting something away. There's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. And I know that to begin with. It varies by the day. There's some days that are harder than others. Like, the other day I was sitting down and I was getting frustrated doing something. And I thought, you know what, I'll just give my dad a call to get this figured out. And then I had to stop myself, like, well, I can't call my dad to get this figured out because my dad's not here anymore. So, I mean, that just kind of stopped me in my tracks. I literally stopped what I was doing and, like, literally just bawled. And I know that I'm going to have good days. I know that I'm going to have bad days. I'm going to have days where I just want to cry all day. And I know I'm going to have days that, you know, not that I don't think about him. It's a good day. I mean, there have been a few days where, like, my mother-in-law asked me one day, she's like, so how are you doing today? And I'm like, well, so far at this point in the day, I haven't cried. And she's like, well, that's good. And I made it that whole day without crying. Then there's days like the other day where I was literally bawling. So, and I know it's fine. It's okay to be, I'm still mourning the loss of my dad. So, it's just, it's been a day-to-day thing. It's been hard. Probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through. And I've lost my grandmother. I've lost actually all my grandparents. I lost my grandmother, one of my mother's mother, earlier this year. I lost my mother's father, how many years? 13 years ago. And my dad's parents, I lost when I was younger. I was 5 when I lost my dad's dad. And I was 11 when I lost my dad's mom. There are bits and pieces that I remember of my dad's dad, but not a whole lot because I was so young. There's stuff that I remember of my dad's mom. I was actually in the room when she passed. So, you know, dealing with stuff like that. And I really wasn't that close to my dad's mom. After I was born, she was very jealous of me because I took my grandfather, how to word it. I took attention from my grandfather, and she was jealous of that. So, she wasn't too fond of me. And even after my grandfather passed away, she kind of tolerated me. I never was really particular. Like, we'd go to her place. I could describe in detail her apartment to you if I had the time. But going to her apartment, like, as a young child, I never wanted to do it. First of all, it wasn't very large. When we would go stay there, my basically my mom and dad, she had a full-size bed and then a full-size pull-out. And basically my mom, and for any of you that know what a full-size pull-out couch, like the actual size of it, It's a little bit bigger than a twin-size bed, but not exactly as big as a full-size bed. And my grandmother would never let us sleep in her bed, which her bed was a queen-size bed. But the three of us had to cram into this full-size pull-out bed. As I was started getting older, obviously, it wasn't... I don't know how to word it. Sleeping in the same bed at, like, age 9 on up with your dad and your mom really isn't the brightest idea, so my parents would start renting, like, a hotel when we'd go. But, like, between when my grandfather passed and before she passed, there was nothing to do at her house. I mean, she did have, like, this one box that had some crayons in it and a few color books, and I like to play with paper dolls. And unless I brought other toys with, there was nothing for me to play with there. Her television was just one of the televisions with bunny ears and antenna. So she didn't have cable or anything, which at home we had cable. And regardless, we watched what she wanted to watch. And there was a little park across the street from her apartment. So when it was nice, my mom would take me over to the park and play. And that's pretty much all I did while we were there. Before she passed away, when she was kind of starting to get sick, there was one time I remember she came over to the park with us, and I collected magic nursery dolls, or not collected, I had a bunch of them, and I had gotten the magic nursery stroller, which turned into a cradle, which also turned into a height chair and all this other, like, transformed in different things. So I had one of my dolls in the stroller, and we pushed it over to the park, and I set it on this one thing, or on an adult swing. If anybody remembers, like, those big adult, like, bench swings that parks had for adults to sit on and swing while kids played. So I set it on there, so she actually sat on the swing, because my mom was sitting on the swing. The two of them sat on the swing talking. And my grandma actually picked up my doll and was, like, actually being nice to me and nice to my doll. And I remember that. But there's not a whole lot I remember of my grandmother, aside from that was one of the few positive interactions that I had with her. So when my dad's mother passed away, my parents came to pick me up from school early. And they gave me the option. My grandmother hadn't passed away yet. The nursing home had called and said that it would be soon, because they lived out of town from where we live, and she was in a nursing home after she got sick. She had a major stroke. But so the nursing home had called and said that there wasn't much time left. So my parents came and picked me up from school, and they gave me the option of staying home with my dad or my mom's parents, and then I could come for the funeral, or I could go with them. And I was in 5th grade at this time. I chose to go with them, and I remember being in my bedroom, and I had a bunk bed, like one of those old metal bunk beds. And I remember sitting on it crying. And my mom came in and asked me if I was crying because I was sad, because Grandma was dying. And I remember telling her no. I was crying because I was upset that I wasn't sad my Grandma was dying. If that makes any sense. Like, I was more upset that I was okay with her dying. And you know, once she did pass, like I said, I was in her room when it happened. And I honestly don't remember crying much at my grandmother's funeral. I don't think I did. I remember bits and pieces of I don't remember the funeral itself, but I remember, like, the little, like, they have, like, those luncheon type things after funerals, like, where they have, like, cookies, cake, or whatever. I remember that. And I don't remember being sad. Like my cousins, some of my cousins that were my age, my dad has a brother, and his brother has a son who's 10 years younger than me. So I was 11 at this time. So my cousin, my dad's brother's son was only 1 at the time. It happened. And I had other cousins that lived around the area my grandmother did, so they came to the funeral. And I remember running around the place that they had it. I want to say it was a gymnasium. I remember running around the gymnasium playing with them. And I don't remember being sad. I just remember running around playing with them. So, you know, I don't remember anything of my grandfather's funeral. I'm just told things about it that I said and did. Like, it was an open casket, and I was freaked out about the fact that the casket was shorter than what my grandfather was. So I thought they cut off his legs to put him in there. So the undertaker actually opened the casket and showed me that basically how they position people in the caskets is they bend their legs to get them in. Well, I didn't know that. So that's the only thing that I was told of the funeral. I don't remember any of the funeral for my grandfather. Then fast forward to, I was an adult with my mother's father dying. I was very close to my grandparents. I was close to that set of grandparents growing up anyways as well. I was actually the one that figured out my grandfather was sick. I was the one that took him to the emergency room when we found out he was in kidney failure. He got sick the week before Thanksgiving. He started dialysis Thanksgiving Day. He did dialysis for a week and then decided no more. That all it was going to do is prolong his life, and he was ready to go. They then stopped dialysis, released him from the hospital into a nursing home, and he kind of bounced back and forth between the nursing home and the hospital because the nursing home couldn't do full care, and he passed away. Christmas Day, he was able to come to my parents' house, and we were able to spend Christmas Day with him. They took him back to the nursing home, and the next day, the day after Christmas, the nursing home had to rush him to the hospital, where he was actually put in ICU, and he then passed away on December 27th. In the ICU in the hospital. So I vividly remember that. I remember crying a lot during that. As I said, I was close to my grandfather. After my grandfather passed, my grandma pretty much took off with her sister to California. And at that point, I kind of felt like I lost both my grandparents, because my grandmother never really kept in contact with us except for to call and yell at my mom, who was power of attorney, over money. So, honestly, when my grandmother came back and my aunt had to put her in a nursing home, I would take my kids over to see my grandmother when we were in town. I would go see my grandmother before my kids were born. But when my mom called to say my grandma was gone, I didn't cry. Driving up to North Dakota, I didn't cry. I cried a little bit at the funeral, and that was it. Like I said, I think I did more mourning, like feeling like I lost both of my grandparents when my grandfather died. I cried a lot more with him. But those were grandparents, so it's nothing compared to losing your parent. I've also had miscarriages. In fact, earlier today we were talking about this with my son. He made the comment that he was the oldest child in the family, and my husband's like, well, actually you're not. He's like, what? Yes, I am. I'm older than my sister. And we're like, well, yes, you are older than your sister, but there are 3 babies that were never born that were older than you, that are older than you. The first miscarriage was hard. My husband was in Iraq when it happened. I got pregnant. He got, they deployed. They had to go to training before their deployment. They got a 2-day pass. He came home. I actually got pregnant in those 2 days he was home. We found out literally the day he got into Iraq. I found out I was pregnant, and we were both really excited. And it was short-lived. It was an early miscarriage. And I basically had to tell him through an email that we lost the baby. It was hard to deal with, being alone. I had a good support system with him even being deployed. I had friends that wouldn't let me be alone. Pretty much his whole deployment, if I wasn't working, I was at my friend's house. So a lot of friends helped me keep my mind off that. The next miscarriage we had was with twins. It was confirmed twins. We were going through fertility. They were not fertility. The twins were not fertility babies. My husband got back from Iraq, and we got pregnant with them right away. And I had been seen by fertility when he came home on his RN. After the first miscarriage, my doctor referred me to fertility clinic because we had been trying for over a year. When my husband deployed, getting pregnant and then miscarrying it right away. My doctor's like, it's been over a year. You had a miscarriage that we have confirmed. Let's look at going to fertility. So he sent me to the fertility clinic. And so my husband came home on R&R. I've been going through stuff at the fertility clinic that I could do. And they did a cycle then, time things for when my husband came home for R&R, and it was unsuccessful. He came back before we could even get back into going to the fertility clinic. I wound up pregnant with the twins. Well, the fertility clinic, being I had been seen by them, wanted me to come in to kind of monitor things before they'd release me to the OB. And at, I think it was 8 weeks, we went in and the babies had stopped growing. And there were no heartbeats at 8 weeks. They were hoping at the point that it was just they implanted late, so they were just behind because they had measured behind the week before. They started doing ultrasounds at 6 weeks. The first ultrasound, they're like, well, they're measuring about 5 weeks, so the heartbeat doesn't necessarily start now. It could, but it doesn't necessarily. So I come back next week. So we came back the next week, and they had grown a little bit, but there still was no heartbeat. So once again, they're like, well, they've grown, so that's a good idea, or a good thing. Your numbers have gone up. Come back next week. Hopefully we'll have a heartbeat. At least 1 heartbeat. Hopefully 2. We came back the next week, and they had grown a little bit from the week before, but not enough to where they should have been, even a week behind. They had only grown, I think they were like 6 weeks in a day when we had gone the week prior, and when we went then, it was like 6 weeks and 2 days. And there still was no heartbeat, and at that point, they're like, stop all meds, because I was on meds to help sustain a pregnancy. They put me on those right away when I got pregnant. And they said, stop all meds. And, you know, if you don't start miscarrying in a few days, come back in and we'll look at other options. After I got off all the meds, within a day or 2, the miscarriage started. Once again, that was hard. But I got through it. And it's still, I mean, the pain from those, from 2 miscarriages, and all the other losses that I had before cannot compare to the pain of my dad. Finding out he had cancer, I cried. Finding out that he had to have brain surgery, I bawled. Finding out that the first surgery failed and he was having a second surgery, I literally cried as I was flying up to North Dakota. I held it together when I was around him. And when I left, I was hopeful. When we came up for my grandmother's funeral, he was acting his normal self, hopeful again. And that all changed in June when he fell. And they did an MRI to figure out why he fell, and the tumor was back, and it was bigger than the second one, or bigger than the other 2. And at that point, that's when my dad's like, I'm done. And I cried for that. When we went up to basically say goodbye, I cried on the way up. As we pulled out of their driveway, as leaving, I cried knowing that was the last time I would ever get to touch my dad. I wanted to be there at the end, but we knew he didn't want me there at the end. I was thankful that Dolly, his caretaker, that Monday before he passed, video chatted. I got to talk to my dad. I got to tell him I loved him. I got to see him. I mean, I didn't get to hold him. I didn't get to hold his hand. I didn't get to give him a hug. I didn't get to give him a kiss. But I got to see him. And the night before he passed away, with the kids video chatting with him, once again, I got to see him. And I'm thankful to be able to see him, but it still isn't the same. The pain is still there. It's hard. Because like I said, I was doing something the other day and I'm like getting frustrated with that, and I knew my dad would be able to help me, but I couldn't call him. And there's a bunch of big reminders sitting right in my bedroom that he's not here with us. I have all his camera equipment. My dad loved photography. He had a couple, well, one was a expensive camera. It's almost a 10-year-old camera, and it's still buying its second. They don't make it anymore, but it's pretty much a professional camera that even on the secondary market, it has a high value. The other one that he used, it's got a lower value, but it's still a decent camera. My dad shot with Sony cameras. I use Canon. So I need to get on YouTube to figure out how to use his cameras, because while there's certain settings that, like ISOs and f-stops and stuff like that on professional cameras are all the same, getting to the menus for that stuff is going to be different. So I need to figure out how to use it. I have got, when we went in July, he made us bring home then his studio setup. All his studio lights, his backgrounds, his frame for the backgrounds. There was a bag of camera bags, the light bulbs for the flashes and the studio lights, and a couple of tripods. But my mom had me bring home the rest of the stuff, and well, I want to get it out and use it. At this point, I just can't. I can't bring myself to use it yet. It's his. It's still his. I don't think it'll ever feel like mine. So, seeing that, sitting in my bedroom, because I don't know where else to put it. I don't want to put it up in the attic. I really don't know where else to put it. It's one of those things that you say you're okay. Because really, a lot of people don't want to hear it. The few people that are like, how you doing? Are just hoping that you're going to say, I'm doing fine. Or if you say, you know, I'm not having that great of a day, they kind of try to brush by it. Like, they were asking to be polite, but they didn't want your true answer. And so that, dealing with that, it's just, right now, I can probably say, am I depressed? No. I don't feel depressed. But I'm grieving. So to say that I'm okay, I'm not okay. I'm grieving. I lost an important person in my life. I lost my Superman. My dad, there wasn't anything my dad couldn't do. I love my husband to death, but there's some things that he goes to fix and he screws up on. And it costs us more to fix what he tried to fix. Where my dad knew where his limitations were. And most of the time he was able to fix. He was a handyman. He was a jack of all trades. I'll be right back. The battery's about to die. Okay, I'm back. Like I was saying, he was a jack of all trades. Their basement had some foundation damage to it that they had to get repaired. And instead of hiring contractors and stuff, they got the basement professionally repaired, or the foundation. But in order to do that, they had to completely tear out, like, they had a finished basement, so it would be like their TV family room. They had to tear out everything. They had to tear out the walls, the finished walls, the carpet, everything to fix this. And while my dad knew he couldn't lay down the floor, he wasn't a professional carpenter, whatever flooring person to lay down carpet. He redid the walls himself. He did it all himself. He completely finished it. Their basement looks really good. I'll add some pictures in at the end of the basement after it was finished. And it looks really nice. He was a mechanic. Most cars he could fix. His yellow Challenger, he built it from the ground up. Well, not from the ground up. When my parents found it, it was literally a shell with a tree growing out where the engine should have been. And he saw something in that car. My mom didn't see it, but he saw it. And he bought it. They drug that thing home. And he spent years working on that car. After work. He would go to work. And then he'd come home and he would work on that car. He spent years and he built that car. He did lots of research on that car. So, like, there's parts on that car and the engine that just had this random splatter of paint that when you go to, like, a car show and see other cars like that, unless they're 100% original, they don't have that splatter of paint on them, because when somebody was redoing that car, they thought that somebody put it there and it shouldn't have been there, so they never put it back. Like, he went into detail with this car on what it would have looked like the day that it rolled off of the assembly line. He was able to do that. People are still in awe. If he didn't know how to do something, he would research to figure out how to do it himself, or he'd find somebody to teach him to do it. Like with the yellow car, he didn't know how to paint the cars, so a friend of he went and worked with a friend of his some days after work to learn how to paint cars. And then when it came to actually shooting the car, painting it, he borrowed another friend's paint booth, and him and the two friends in a couple nights painted the car. That's just how my dad was. He was an excellent photographer. Growing up, when I was younger, he would take lots of pictures. And then he kind of got out of that for a while, and around the time my son was born, he started kind of getting back into it. He got back into like digital photography. And once again, YouTube videos and how-to books showed him how to edit them, how to edit his pictures, how to shoot, which way to shoot, how to import, which programs were the best. Some of his cameras actually have features that he added in himself to do different things. And, I mean, that's just how my dad was. He was a jack of all trades. So, I was trying to do something on my computer the other day, and I was getting frustrated because it was not working. And I know I could have called my dad and been like, Dad, I'm trying to do this. I do this, this, and this. This is what's happening. And more than likely, he would be able to troubleshoot it over the phone and tell me what I was doing wrong. I mean, I can still hear his voice anytime I called. He'd answer the phone. What do you want now? That's always how he answered the phone when I called. And then he would answer it, and you knew he was smiling as he was saying it. My dad always had this cheeky smile on his face. It was a mischievous smile. But the way he talked when he smiled was always different than when he would talk. So if he was upset, he would say, "What do you want now?" Versus, "What do you want now?" Like, you knew he was smiling just by the tone. And it's just, I don't know. I have regrets in life. There's videos of my dad with the kids. But I wish I would have taken more videos with him. Finding pictures for the slideshow for his funeral. There weren't any pictures of him and my daughter until she was older than 1. My son, approximately the same thing, around 1, was when I finally could find some pictures of him with my dad. I regret not, like, birthday parties and stuff. My dad would always be the photographer. He'd come in with his camera and he would take all the pictures. My son's first birthday party, I've got pictures of my son with my husband's parents, with his dad and stepmom. I have pictures of my son with my mom. I have pictures of my son with my aunts and my uncles. But there's not a single picture of him with my dad. And my dad was his world. He was a papa's boy. He'd go over to my parents' house, and once he could talk and say Papa, he would go running in, barreling in the house, screaming Papa, looking for my dad. When we went back after my dad passed, I mean, he knew he wasn't there, but he was walking around looking for him. He went into my dad's office and sat down in my dad's chair and was looking around. My dad collected, like, Hot Wheels and die-cast cars. His office, my dad's parents were hoarders, so he always said that he couldn't stand hoarders, but my dad was a hoarder. to the extent, like, my dad knew when to throw away garbage, but he had massive collections of the cars. It literally filled that room and then some. And my son was looking around. And my mom walked in and said, "What are you doing?" Just asking him, not anything negative. Just curious what he was doing. And she goes, "My son sat back, crossed his arms like my dad always had his arms crossed." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm being Papa right now." And my mom goes, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah. Since Papa's not here, I need to be Papa." And my mom's heart just broke. My dad, they had a hospital bed in my parents' bedroom. They took down my parents' bed the day after we left in July. And he slept in a hospital bed in the bedroom. So when we got there, hospice had already come and taken the hospital bed out. So it was just pretty much an empty room. And my mom had the door shut. And my son went in there. And he just stopped in there and started crying. This was the only time that through this whole thing, that I've seen my son cry. And I figured he was upset because my parents' bed wasn't in there. And he was upset because Papa wasn't in there. Because when we were there, my dad was going to be in one of 4 places. Downstairs watching TV laying on the couch. In the porch watching TV laying on the couch. In his office on his computer. Or in his bedroom laying on the bed watching TV. And not only was the bed there, Papa wasn't there watching TV. It's just been incredibly hard dealing with the kids, trying to help them through this. My daughter has been crying. Apparently she's gone to the school counselor a few times to talk about my dad. My mom gave her a Beanie Baby of my dad's, and she takes it to school with her every day. She pretty much, wherever she goes, Papa Bear goes. And that bear, like I said, it's going everywhere with her. Aside from my son crying that one time, I haven't really seen him cry. We went over to my in-laws' house a few days ago, and it was the first time that he had seen my in-laws since we got back. And he walked in, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Papa Kenny's dead." He died at the age of 63. He didn't make it to he died before his 64th birthday. He had cancer. Cancer killed him. And I mean, just a statement. Looked at my mother-in-law and walked out of the house to go play in the backyard. We're waiting on hospice to do the transfer. Apparently they don't typically do, like, the grief stuff until 30 days after the passing, which to me, I don't understand why it has to be 30 days. To me, it should be a little bit earlier. But my mom did request that they kind of expedite it and do it faster, because of my son and my daughter are having a hard time with it. She wants me to go do it. I had talked, one of her cousin's husband is actually a hospice chaplain, and him and I talked I actually started out talking with his wife, and he was sitting behind her. His wife is my mom's cousin. And he was kind of listening in. And listening in a little bit. He even said, he's like, you know, with some of the grief counseling, he goes, some people need it, and he goes, just talking to you, I feel like if you went in, it would start opening up other stuff that you don't need to be dealing with right now. You're going to be grieving, you're going to be sad, you're going to cry. And going to grief counseling isn't going to stop that. You've come to terms that your dad was sick, and as hard as it is, he had to go. He had to move on. That's just life. And so he said that he thinks for me it's going to open up stuff and take me places. He goes, I know how they do the grief counseling through hospice, and he goes, if they do it where you're at, anything like here, he goes, it might take you down a rabbit hole you don't want to go down right now. So I'm kind of on the fence about going to grief counseling myself through hospice, but I know the kids need it. They're trying to deal with it as well as they can. And I think the hardest part for me, aside from missing my dad, is trying to help them through this. And they were incredibly close to my dad. Like I said, my son was a Papa's boy. He'd go running in their house screaming Papa. In fact, when we were there in July, we got there at 2 in the morning, and my mom literally had to stop him at the door and say, Kobe, you can't go in, and run in yelling Papa because Papa's sleeping. It's 2 in the morning. So the next morning, my son got up, went upstairs to find his Papa. And my dad was laying down in bed taking a nap, so my son climbed into bed with my dad and laid down with him and just laid there next to my dad in bed. So, I know this is just kind of rambling. It's stuff I need to get out. For those of you that made it to this point, thank you. I know it probably, not many people, it's going to be a super long video. It's going to be probably over 45 minutes. And that's okay if people don't watch all of it. This is just my grieving process that I needed to get out. And basically it's okay to not be okay. And I know I'm not the only one going through this alone. There are others out there that have lost loved ones this year, specifically their dads, and it's hard. I know come his birthday in October or November, it's gonna be hard. Christmas is going to be hard. Things like that are gonna be hard for me. I stopped myself at Walmart the other day looking at something thinking, oh, my dad would love this. I don't have my dad to buy it for anymore. He's gone. There was a Papa shirt that I found the other day. And my dad absolutely, his favorite shirts were, those that watched the other video about him on his funeral program, the shirt that he had on, it says, never underestimate a father that listens to Led Zeppelin. He loved Led Zeppelin, and when he saw that shirt, he told my mom he had to order it. He was proud to be a dad. He was proud to be a Papa. Every year for Father's Day, my kids would buy him a dad, or they would try to find a grandfather or Papa shirt. But if we couldn't find grandfather or Papa, we'd get him like a dad shirt. And he wore those shirts proudly. In fact, there's a few of them my mom had to throw away because she goes, they got so bad. But like I said, I'm kind of just more so rambling right now. And it's just, I needed to get this out there. I need to get some of this stuff off my chest. And this is the only way I know how right now. So thank you for watching, and I will see everyone in the next video. Bye.